Propaganda, and I think we were mentioning this earlier too, propaganda is kind of an unsophisticated term that's used in countries where information is controlled. So the Russians used propaganda. The Nazis used propaganda. The Chinese still have an office of propaganda. Propaganda is essentially when you block true information and you flood controlled false information, intentionally false information, what's known as disinformation.
Do you think we do that?
I think
in our own country to our own people?
It's different for us. We don't have the ability to make propaganda because we can't control the flow of accurate information. What we do have the ability to do is use the tenets of covert influence and misinformation, which is errant or wrong information. We do allow those things to take root. So, for example, let's just look at the spy balloon. That was another thing on your list. What was it, 4 weeks ago? A Chinese spy balloon was suspected over Montana, over Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana. 4 days later, it was shot down in the Atlantic Ocean. The United States went crazy, right? A Chinese balloon with a satellite hanging from underneath it, actively spying on us in our own airspace. Like, the American public went nuts. And then the next 3 things that got shot down, what did they call them?
UAPs.
Unidentified flying objects, UFOs, or unidentified aerial phenomenon, right? They did not want to call them balloons because the government realized that by calling so much attention to the fact that this first balloon was a Chinese balloon and a spy satellite, they had painted themselves into a corner. Now they had an international incident they had to manage because they gave too much information to the American public. Simply by having the same thing happen again, and it wasn't even the same thing. It wasn't a Chinese spy balloon at all. It was a frickin' Idaho University research balloon that they shot down over the Great Lakes, right? They didn't want to run the risk of calling it a balloon, even though it was reported as a spherical object or whatever they call it, right? They would prefer to call it a UFO because China spy balloon, everybody pays attention. UFO shot down, nobody really pays attention. So inside the United States, what ends up happening is governments, government, military, federal government, you name it, administration, they pick words that are less alarmist, and that's the words that they choose to use when they brief the media at the White House. Hey, we found an unidentified flying object over Idaho, or whatever else it might be, right? Somebody writes that story up, all the UFO people in the world get excited. Nobody cares anymore from the China spy balloon stuff.
Yeah.
Right? And the US government, probably rightfully so, is assuming that the average American isn't smart enough to connect the two. Spy balloon here, UFO there. But what if that UFO is actually a balloon? So then we have 2 more incidents over the next week and a half, 2 more balloons shot down by F-35s and F-16s. Again, balloons, but they don't call them balloons, they call them UFOs. And then what happens? Now the federal government has just said that they shot down 3 UFOs. Now all of a sudden it's freaking headline news again. And they're like, oh shit, we shouldn't have called them UFOs. Or at least we shouldn't have called all 3 of them UFOs because now the whole world thinks that we are shooting down UFOs. We've got to back this up, right? So the government does a very bad job of controlling the information flow because they know they can't. It's difficult for them to do so. But they can control classified information. So they will overclassify. You've seen that, I'm sure, in your days at CIA and in the SEAL teams. We overclassify all the time as a stopgap to making sure that we don't accidentally overshare. So that's how we handle misinformation. We make the information unavailable, knowing full well that journalists and bloggers and whoever else are going to jump onto the story without all the facts and make mistakes. If it benefits American security, national security, they have no problem with that. Sometimes they even seed intentional information just so that they can send a message, like you saw in the beginning part of Ukraine, like you saw with all the soldier counts in Ukraine. I remember in the first 3 or 4 months, the US government was confirming reports from Ukrainian generals about 50,000 dead Russian soldiers compared to 1,500 dead Ukrainian soldiers. Remember when they used to do the body counts? That was just them acknowledging information that they knew was wrong and letting the newspapers run with it anyways. That's how the federal government handles misinformation to the American public. If it benefits national security, let them eat cake.
Hey everybody, I'm Shawn Ryan. Click here to subscribe to the Shawn Ryan Show YouTube channel for the hottest and most compelling interviews that you will not see anywhere else. I've also made a playlist of all the previous SRS episodes so they're easy to find. You can find that right here.